Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting for December the 16th, 2024. I will call the meeting to order. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. And the recommendation is that a closed meeting of council be held on December 16th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. in accordance with Section 239(2)(b) of the Municipal Act to consider the following: striking a committee, which is Section 239(2)(b), personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. To get that on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favour? That carries unanimously, and we will reconvene at approximately 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's always nice to see the gallery full. I will now ask that Council reconvene an open session at 7:02 p.m. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes the collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. There are two additions to the agenda this evening. One is a specific interest delegation, and the other is a piece of correspondence. May I have adoption of the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Dunstall.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I have a conflict with a couple of the people that are applying for the Canada Day volunteer group.
Thank you. When we report out of closed, we will separate our vote to allow you to step aside for your conflict. We do have the minutes from our November 25th regular council meeting and our December 9th special council meeting. The recommendation is that they be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Any questions or comments on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We have both general and specific interest delegations who have registered to address Council this evening. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to address Council. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed up to the podium when you are called upon to speak. If you conduct yourself in the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting, including interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and/or hate or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from Council. This is Council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. Although it is rare, I would like to remind delegates and members of the public that failure to adhere to appropriate decorum may result in the microphone being muted or removal from the meeting, and out of respect for all meeting participants, I do ask that those in the gallery remain seated unless exiting the chambers and avoid personal conversations or expressions of support or opposition to those speaking, in order for everyone to hear the proceedings as they occur. On to the general interest delegations. Again, just a reminder that to Council that after hearing the general interest delegations, Council can receive for information only or refer the matter to staff for additional information. Matters addressed during general interest delegations are not to be debated, and only questions of clarification are permitted. And I will now invite this evening's general interest delegation. Our first one is Kevin Thomason. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
Excellent. Honourable Mayor, councillors and guests, my name is Kevin Thomason, a longtime Wilmot resident and a member of the Fight for Farmland group trying to save our communities from the disaster of the Wilmot Land Assembly and the unplanned growth being forced onto our unwilling community by Waterloo Region, the Economic Development Corporation and the provincial government. Right from the first threat of expropriation back in March, when local farmers and landowners were given 10 days to sign over their properties, homes, farms, and businesses at insultingly low prices, or face it being taken forcibly by government, the vast majority of our community has been appalled and horrified about our farmland and community being destroyed by a massive mega-industrial site, as well as the draconian processes being used by our governments. There is yet to be a single public meeting. There has been no studies, no reports released to the public. There has been no financial costing, and every single one of our Freedom of Information requests seeking even the most basic information has been rejected. We have more than 4,500 Fight for Farmland lawn signs on area properties. Citizens have rallied, protested, called, written by the thousands, month after month, with still all meetings being held in secret behind closed doors. And while the closed meeting investigator might have cleared Wilmot Township this week against anything illegal, it still doesn't mean the public should be kept in the dark about whatever development is being proposed here. That goes against all previous long-term planning, sustainability goals, and protections of our most valuable farmland, as well as the groundwater aquifers of the Waterloo Moraine that we all depend on. Every single aspect of this proposed land assembly fiasco has been bundled, including the decision to waste hundreds of thousands of precious taxpayer dollars on destroying a corn crop so bountiful it could have produced 2.5 million boxes of cereal. 9 months into things, our farmers still wake up each day wondering if today is going to be the day that they lose their home and farm and be expropriated. These farmers and neighbors were told last spring to not even bother planting crops, but thank goodness they did, or how would they be surviving now without any income, as nothing has happened on the mega site in months. It appears even the region has given up on negotiations and is letting everything languish as economic uncertainty under Donald Trump is causing investors and corporations to flee. Agriculture is already the largest industry in Wilmot, employing more people and earning more income than any other industry. We're world leading, and it shouldn't be destroying our primary economic driver, falsely hoping for something we're told will be better with no details or data. Our farmers are now agonizing about the year ahead. How many tens of thousands of dollars should they spend to purchase seeds and fertilizer for the coming year? How can anyone be expected to run a business stuck in limbo with such uncertainty? And it isn't just these directly impacted landowners. Other Wilmot farmers are severely impacted as well. Even the region is going to have to figure out what to plant and how to manage their 160 acres this spring. Even worse, though, area homeowners report not being able to sell their homes and facing dramatically reduced property values because of this proposed mega-industrial site. Not a single person here was elected on the platform of quintupling our population with massive boundary expansion that has just occurred for Newham-Badenburg, or elected to destroy our previously protected farmland on such an unprecedented massive scale. The community is calling for the end of this nightmare since it was foisted on us unwillingly. It has been made blatantly clear that the landowners are unwilling, the farmers are unwilling, the community is unwilling, and we need you to tell the Premier, using his own words, that we are not a willing host. In case there are any doubts, I'm here to present to you hundreds and hundreds of signed petitions from citizens, taxpayers, and families throughout Wilmot and beyond, calling for Wilmot Township Council to support the demands of Wilmot citizens and declare that we are an unwilling host. That Council approve a motion clearly stating that we are unwilling, that a proper public planning process be undertaken to find a superior location for a megasite that minimizes farmland loss and environmental impact, and that our official plan and countryside line be reinstated to provide long-term planning certainty here in Wilmot. You have a chance to approve a motion that would end this unplanned fiasco that could drag on for years. We don't want to be the next Pickering Airport that has sat stalled for decades. Nothing will drive away investment or erode our current success faster than uncertainty and chaos. Wilmot Township has enough challenges ahead just trying to avoid a 51% tax increase and stay solvent. We haven't even been able to get the basics of a small municipality right. What are the odds that creating one of the world's largest, most complex manufacturing facilities is going to go right when every aspect so far has been bundled? There has been no proper planning. So little of the required infrastructure exists. There hasn't even been a single public meeting held by any of the proponents, and the public is already so overwhelmingly opposed. It's also highly unlikely, when your Premier Ford has cut so many development charges and limited what municipalities can charge for, that this megasite is going to solve any financial woes anytime soon, possibly ever. Just ask so many other community taxpayers, funding millions of dollars of incentives, infrastructure, and often left on the hook and holding the bag when the province or proponent backs out on them. Or even look at this week's news that taxpayers are now on the hook subsidizing $14 million worth of development charges on another bungled industrial fiasco.
1 minute left.
Thank you. That we weren't charged to Amazon, one of the world's largest, most profitable companies in Canada. You have been held hostage and muzzled by the region, which itself has been thrown under the bus and so mistreated by this provincial government, which has developed a reputation for scandal, for favoritism, for a lack of planning, lack of financial accountability, a lack of transparency, and that's just a summary from last week's Auditor General's provincial report on Ontario Place, the Science Centre, and other signature projects of the Ford government. We are better than this. This isn't how we do things here. We need to end this now, get our own house in order, get back to our visionary official plans that already accommodate thousands of new residents and businesses far more sustainably while ensuring our agriculture industry and environment thrives. Plans that have had years of efforts, thousands of pages of study, massive public input, and are the envy of so many other communities. Please listen to your constituents. These petitions can't be any clearer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us. I will remind the gallery to please hold any applause. Thank you. And I did just want to note, I know that you did hand the paper copy, but we have already received your other submission of the petition.
Yes, yes.
And that has been circulated to council already.
Excellent, thank you. And I want to thank the clerk's efforts earlier this week to get those into the package in time for everyone. I realize there's an absurd amount of scanning, a lot of work in Photoshop to black out names after names after names, but thank you for all the efforts for that. So.
Thank you again. I don't see any questions, so thank you very much for joining us, Kevin. And I will also extend the offer, although I know you and I both know it exists, is to come delegate to the region as well.
Yes.
As you did point out, they are the ones currently doing this project. So
you're right, and we've certainly tried at every opportunity to get to the region, although please note this council was directed, this petition was directed to Wilmot Council from Wilmot citizens, and if you'd seen even at like the New Hamburg Fall Fair, the 20-minute long lineup where people stood there just waiting to sign these petitions and such, it's clear they wanted the message sent here. So,
yes, thank you very much. I will now invite up our next general interest delegation, Daniel Siegel, on behalf of Siegel Construction to address council, and I believe Daniel's joining us virtually.
Good evening.
Hello, Daniel. You will have 7 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for joining, for inviting me to your council meeting. That was a very passionate address, and frankly, I think a lot of things that he mentioned are super important, just to underscore that if that many people are signing a petition, there's clearly an issue that needs to be addressed. In any case, I'm here today to discuss affordable subdivisions of municipally developed land. So we all agree that there's a housing crisis in the province, and frankly, over the last 15 years, I haven't seen a good solution. So hopefully that's what I'm going to do this evening. I've done about 50 plus of these delegations across the province to different councils. And the key to solving the affordable housing crisis is an issue of supply. And how do we increase the supply of houses under $500,000 while not building on prime agricultural land, which is a key feature of any successful project. In Wilmot, the affordable purchase price of a detached house is $474,300, which frankly is incredibly high. Just earlier this evening, I did Plymouth Wyoming, and their price was $452,000, and I thought that was high. In context, I think Toronto is $350,000 or $370,000. So $100,000 more for Wilmot doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That being said, the goal across the province is really to increase the supply of entry-level houses for the newlyweds and the nearly deads of this province. Frankly, the housing ladder is broken. It's missing a whole bunch of rungs. And that's frankly, a response to the fact that affordable housing, so housing under $500,000, has really only been built twice in Canadian history. So the first one was the wartime housing, 1920s to 1940s, and then again in the 70s and 80s. But everything outside that time period, myself included, investors have bought up affordable houses, put additions, ADUs, etc., and all of a sudden they're no longer affordable across the province. So my solution is to take, with the help of different municipalities across the province, take land that is suitable for development, not prime agricultural land, for example, and look at how to do attainable subdivisions of entry-level houses. The key to success here is separating the value of the house from the value of the land and looking at creative solutions to do that. So my goal here is that my delegation be referred to council so that I could, referred to staff for a report so that I could work with planning staff to identify appropriate sites to do subdivisions of houses under $500,000. In a lot of council meetings, staff will ask me, well, how come you don't approach the region? And then when I approach the region, they say we're not responsible for this type of housing. Regions are generally responsible for everything from transitional housing right up to rent geared to income, but attainable housing is not on their mandate. So it's up to the private sector, and frankly, the private sector has dropped the ball since the 80s, frankly. And I think it's time that we take a concerted effort to address that gap in the current housing inventory. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but ultimately, the best result of this delegation would be for it to be referred to staff so that I could present the model in greater detail.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Councillors, are there any questions at this time? I'm not seeing any questions at this time. I do just want to note, Daniel, I know that the region may have said to you that they aren't responsible for attainable housing. They have, however, done a similar, partnered in a similar model to what you are suggesting with Build Now, which is trying to find municipalities with excess inventory of land and then partnering with Habitat for Humanity to create attainable entry-level design. So I would just suggest that you look into that. But apart from that, thank you very much for joining us and for delegating this evening.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
You too. And we will move along to our final general interest delegation. And that is, sorry, I'm just lost track on my script here. Barry Wolf, you will have 7 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I believe Season's Greetings is what you have as your topic.
Good evening. As was mentioned, you can get almost anything on Amazon. So I went on Amazon and I looked for a ma in her bonnet and I looked for a pa in his cap. So I ordered a pa in his cap. And this is what I got. Bacon scrapings are the little bits of meat left in the greasy fry pan. They're tasty, but the nutrition sometimes needs searching for. This is a bacon scraping. I didn't think you'd be the first to laugh. Thank you. 'Twas the week before Christmas in Castle Kilbride. The creatures were all huddled up cozy inside. 45 scribblers were planning with care, knowing that budget time soon would be there. The statues have quickly been dug from their beds, hidden away in some cold storage shed. So Lura was hired to connect with the folks to see if suggestions positive evoke. When out in the press there arose such a clatter, it seemed that the farmers still didn't matter. Away to the lines went tractors and wagons, vocal protesters, their signs they were dragging. The sun on the breast of the new fallen snow showed Alfred of Lowrick still leading the flow. When what to Miss Redmond's weary eyes did appear, but Trump saying Canada will soon disappear. With Clark at the helm, so lively and quick, defining the terms of debate quite the trick, now council must beg for permission to talk with citizens. Questions, all answers be balked. Common ground has been found, trust issues are all drained, I'm ready to lead us, they proudly proclaimed. The citizens' tax bills soon out they will go, and we'll build us an edifice, no staff in the snow. We've lifted our heads and we're looking around to see if a way for input be found. The rules of procedure restricting ones say it's easier to mumble and just stay away. The roads are all plowed and driveways all filled, shoveling exercise. Residents are thrilled to get out and chat with a neighbor unseen since the clouds of winter rolled over the scene. Caitlin took office. To enthused applause, we'll see how she runs it. Is she really the boss? How he pushed harder for small spaces placement. He wanted his kids out quick from the basement. Olga takes $5, receipt with a smile, for each FOI request form that you file. Elaine is the face of this place so tender, a bender, call sender, surrender, befriender. The guy was too big to confine to this place. They needed a station in which he could grace us all with safe homes through every season. 3 stations, 1 man, it's gotta be Leeson. We hear of the reserve that fund, it is empty. Just give up some other, then soon we'll have plenty. But give up $2 million in charges ain't dandy. Take back a made promise so others get candy. As dry leaves before the wild hurricanes fly, December's gray clouds force our eyes to the sky. With some folks amazed, driveled by the dozen, Ward 2 sends its thanks to Chris Wilkinson. And then in a twinkling I heard at the table the pounding of gavel, the meetings enable. Natasha, she's pushing for only the facts, but getting straight info's like herding 12 cats. This delegate closes this tale at Rhodes Snyder with wishes for peace and a new year that's wiser. But let us exclaim ere we drive out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. We live in a diverse community. Not all of us have cultural ties to Christmas. I'd like to send to all my fellow Wilmot citizens my wishes for cohesion and solidarity as we seek ways to have our voices heard, not just by council and its hired administration staff, but also by each other. The community consultations for the Prime Minister's Path project may help us along that journey. So season's greetings to those who at this time of the year celebrate Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Bondi, Yule, Shahib Zada, and any others I'm not aware of. But let me explain before I walk off this site. Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. I'll send you a copy for your files, Clerk.
Thank you very much, Barry, and I'm assuming that that was in kind jest, the comments that were made, and
yeah.
I'm sure that took you
Gentle probes, just like everything.
ample time, but thank you for coming in. Councillors, that is all of our specific interests, or sorry, all of our general interest delegations. We do have one specific interest delegation, which will be Mr. Wolf coming back at the CAO recruitment options. In terms of correspondence, did anyone want to pull any items? Councillor Sadhu.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to speak to 10.3, the correspondence from Amber Grant.
Yep, you may go ahead.
Yep. So I've been hearing for a while the speeding issues on Livingston and the potential issues with visibility and during school hours. I understand there's been, unfortunately, a couple dogs who have been hit on Livingston. So I just wanted to flag this and bring it up to staff and to Director Molyneux to see if we can have a feasibility study to see what kind of goes in and around of lowering the speed limit by the school and potentially having speed bumps to help calm traffic.
Director Molyneux.
Through you, Mayor. So Council may recall that in September earlier this year that you did approve a policy and a process for these types of requests. And there was also a list provided with that report that spoke to the information that we do have on some segments throughout the township, and I believe this segment was one that was flagged. So I will just call that to attention, that when we do receive requests like this, or if there are residents that are concerned about traffic calming needs, then they'd be best to be steered through that process so that they can submit it and that we can use that for review and return back to council with information. In terms of, I'll say, budget that would be required for such items, we did also present a level of service to council in this budget process, and so that's also flagged to your attention, that we do have a general request in the capital budget process so that we can look at implementation and actually install anything that would be recommended, because in cases of speed bumps and those sorts of things, they do come at a cost, and so we do need some capital associated with that.
Is that sufficient, Councillor Sadhu?
Just wanted to clarify, so when I go back to Amber, where should she address these concerns to directly again?
Through you, Mayor, so we can, I can provide you with a link, and then she can connect with staff either through the link or directly as well, and then we can put it into the approved process.
I do have a speakers list here, Councillor Cressman, followed by Wilkinson and then Dunstall. So Councillor Cressman. Oh, okay, I guess I'm getting my list changed. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, just to follow up on this particular piece of correspondence, I'm glad my colleague here pulled it. The link that you speak of, Director Mohs, is this available through the Wilmot website?
Through you, Mayor, yes, that's correct, it is.
Very good. Okay, look forward to it.
Now, Councillor Dunstall, are you speaking on the same item or? Okay, so we will go to you first, Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I was actually going to pull this because I think this is a good example of how large organizations can have leaks of funds. And with the budget top of mind, that's something that we all have to look at. When we first looked at this program that the township brought forward, it was brought forward in a manner in which we would be able to do the work and save money by grouping things together. And although as council, we always want to do the one-offs, we want to help our constituents when they come to us. Those are the types of things where we can start leaking money really quickly when we go outside of a process that we've put together to give our constituents what they want, but keep funds, keep costs down. So I just wanted to point out that although we want to help always, sometimes we just have to go through the process so that we can get our constituents what they want and save money at the same time.
Now I believe Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I would like to pull 10.1.
Go ahead.
So through you, Mayor, to either Caitlin or to the clerk or to the acting CAO, I was wondering what the relative percentage of the cost of this investigation falls on the municipality versus the individual raising the complaint, because from my reading of the lawyer's summary, initially it wasn't quite clear what the complainant was looking for, and where I come from, that sounds a lot like a fishing expedition. So I'm just kind of wondering what our rules are for complaints like this. I realize there's procedures to allow them, but as well, there has to be something that as well has an onus rather than them just being frivolous in nature.
I believe Clerk Boss is going to answer your question.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Through Councillor Cressman, the municipality does contract a closed meeting investigator to provide these services to members of the public who would like to do an investigation in closed meetings. It's part of good governance and having processes in place where people can do investigations. I would have to report back to you on the cost for this report and the breakdown of that as well. I don't have that information at hand.
And I understand, through you, Mayor, and I understand that's acceptable. I wasn't expecting you to have it. I'm just trying to say, is there some onus on the complainant to have any financial stake in the investigation, or is it strictly the township that bears the cost?
Through Mayor Salonen to Councillor Cressman, it is my understanding that there is no cost for the investigation on them.
Does any other councillor want to pull any consent agenda items? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just to confirm, we've moved on from correspondence. We're talking about consent agenda now.
My apologies. I meant correspondence. Thank you for correcting me. We're about to jump into consent agenda. I just wanted to preempt and get us there. So no more correspondence. Thank you. Okay. So for consent agenda items, would anybody like to remove any items? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I would like to pull both 11.3 and 11.4.
Okay, and you may speak to 11.3 first.
Perfect. So through the chair to Chief Leeson, I'm just curious about the fire service boundary agreement. I mean, I think it makes sense, obviously, that we're trying to protect our neighbors and have our neighbors protect us and kind of go back and forth with regards to what's happening out to the south of our township here. But I'm just curious because based on what I'm reading, it would appear that we're losing revenue based on this new model to the tune of about $12,622. And I think it's obviously moving to a model that will be more cost effective for our neighbors. However, I'm curious why the decision was made to have the budget reflect this next year versus not this year or 2025 coming up.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson, the agreement ends at the end of this calendar year, so therefore those numbers that I provided you were assumptions that based on historics, that if it were to continue with those same assumptions, and we've got a 5-year window that we were looking at, so we can assume that they'll be similar, that would be the kind of revenue if we stayed at the per capita agreement. However, as we move forward, fee-for-service agreements have become a lot more popular. They're more equitable for both parties. I mean, if we happen to get a call into that coverage area where it's extended, a very lengthy structure fire turns into 8-10 hours for some reason or another, that would be a significant cost to the Blandford-Blenheim community in that case. But historically speaking, comparatives, we would be at a lower cost overall, and therefore the Township of Wilmot isn't putting their resources there. We're spending our time within our township as well where we need to be in most cases. I hope that answers your question.
Through the chair, perhaps maybe we carry this conversation over to when we discuss budget. The way I interpret it is that you're still going to budget for your last year's number on the old model in 2025, but that would be overinflated compared to the future prediction. Like we're basically overestimating by $12,000. Is that accurate?
Yes, through the chair. It was comparing the number, the actual, if we did the per hour calls and compared it versus the per capita outlay. So over the 5-year period, if we compared everything, we would be down that amount of money. But we won't technically be that because the agreement ends this year, and then we would just be fee for service going forward. So I just wanted to illustrate the difference between the per capita versus the fee for service model.
I think Director Clark also wants to add in on this.
So two things impacted the decision to leave it as presented. One being the late nature of it developing, and that Blandford-Blenheim advising the chief that they, in essence, canceled the agreement, and the chief reaching out to renegotiate the agreement on the terms that make sense to them on a fee-for-service, which we discussed at length, and it makes sense. We're only incurring costs when we respond to an event, so therefore we'll charge them for those events. In terms of leaving the budget as it is, it was late in the process, and so adjusting it leads to a whole bunch of calculations and changes and impacts, which, given the uncertainty of whether that's the right number, some other number's the right number, and the magnitude of that number, it's not material in terms of adjusting the budget, and in fact would have been a reduction in revenue and therefore an increase further to the rate. So we decided to leave it, and if it's proven out that that is the case, that the revenues are lower, then in 2026 we'll adjust it down.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I guess we could table this conversation for the budget when this particular item comes up, but I mean, it appears to me as though the public are essentially going to be making up the shortfall because we're budgeting a higher number but expecting lower revenues. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, no, in essence, we're not charging the public additional because we're not reducing the revenue. So by including the higher revenue amount for fire, we're reducing the amount of levy that we would be collecting for fire. And so in essence, at the end of the year, all things being equal, we may have a negative variance in fire because of this lack of revenue. And in terms of the model of charging them, we didn't have a choice to continue at the old model because they no longer wanted that service at that cost. So the only reason they would agree to this service is because the chief renegotiated it based on a actual cost versus a per capita cost.
Through the chair, let me maybe be more direct. This is going, you are budgeting a higher number in terms of expected revenue in the budget, but we are expecting to generate less revenue. So that will create a gap. I assume that we're probably earmarking that extra $12,000 at somewhere in the fire budget, correct?
Yes, it forms. So in essence, what happens is the net levy is the difference between all expenses and all revenues. So by having that higher revenue in there, we have less need for levy, and so our net levy is lower for 2025 because of this being in there. So we'll be collecting less taxes because of this higher revenue. At the end of the day, the actuals that come out of all of this may or may not be a surplus, a deficit, or bang on, and that will determine the ultimate position. But in terms of how much levy we collect next year, it will be less because of this.
False proof.
Yeah. Through the chair to Chief Leeson, is Blandford Blenheim, say for instance this is deferred until a budget conversation is had around this number. I realize it's $12,000, but let's face it, we're not talking about budget tonight, but $12,000 is $12,000. If this isn't renewed by the end of the year, would they expect us to continue under the old model and that would sort of be assumed until the new agreement and budget can be worked out?
Through the chair, I can't answer that question without speaking to the Blandford Blenheim fire chief / clerk to see if they're willing to wait, or the CAO. There would have to be a discussion. Their expectation was that we would take it to council tonight and see what the appetite is. If I may too, I know you're speaking about a $12,000 difference, but really what I want to deal is there isn't a $12,000 difference. If you look at 2020 to 2024, each year, if you go to the second per capita contract, there was the escalating amounts based on a 2% COLA each year. So for example, in 2020, we collected 53, 63, 89, and so on and so forth. The difference is going to be in the last year. That's where the difference will be. So we're talking the difference between $5,800, and if you use the example 2024 to date, we would have collected on the fee-for-service agreement, we would have collected $1,679.58. That would be your difference. It's not $12,000 real money. It's the difference is $3,000 in real money.
Through the chair, I do see that, and I think it's just the way it's presented here would appears that we're looking at a gap of 12,000. So I think as to maybe be a good neighbor, given that our neighbors are expecting this, I'd probably be in favor of moving this forward, and then we can address maybe that, as my colleague here called it, a false profit when we review the budget and look at it that way. But I'll leave that for now and shelve it for the future conversation.
Do any other councillors want to comment on item 11.3 as it's been pulled? Okay, seeing none, then Councillor Wilkinson, you wanted 11.4 as well?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Director Mullen here. So just a couple questions of clarification. I mean, I understood, I read this a couple times. We are assuming and acquiring land for wastewater management purposes, but it's being purchased by the developer who's disposing of these things. So essentially, we're not incurring the cost directly. However, my question sort of arose out of looking at the legal fees. So we have to cover the legal fees for the assumption of this. Is this standard practice? Is this typically just conveyed to us? Do we normally incur legal fees on something like this? Because it's $5,000.
Through you, Mayor. So I guess just in terms of the time frame, and 2005 was when the approval and the construction process took place. And so at that time, we didn't have dedicated development engineering staff, so this would have been considered an oversight in terms of the approval process. We are fortunate that the developer is working with us to, I guess, to give us the land, we'll say, at their cost. However, we do have some responsibility in that as well, so we've negotiated with them to cover a portion of the costs. And we consider that to be a result of our error as a lack of span of control, we'll say, from a staffing perspective. So yes, there is a minor cost in terms of the legal cost, but it's not the bulk of the cost that we would have to incur if we were to go through other means to get the land to ensure we have a compliant swim facility.
Any other questions on 11.4, councillors? Okay, seeing none. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder of all consent agenda items, which is 11.1 through to 11.4. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman with the vigor over there. And all those in favor, that carries unanimously. On to our reports. As I did mention earlier, we have one registered delegation for this item, and just if you're following along, the first item is 12.1 for Chief Administrative Officer recruitment options. So I will start with our delegation from Barry Wolf. Barry, thank you again for joining us. I see without the cap with braids this time, but you will have 7 minutes.
I've been known to milk a joke, but not that one. Good evening. This past Saturday morning, about 200 citizens attended a town hall meeting facilitated by their Ward 2 councillor, Chris Wilkinson. And this is in the context of we're here to hire a CAO, and the CAO is responsible for the overall management of the corporation. So it's a big decision. The Ward 2 meeting was an opportunity for residents to speak and to listen to each other and share what they knew, what they didn't know, and why they didn't know it. They shared their experiences, opinions about how the affairs of the Corporation of Township of Wilmot are conducted and have been conducted over many, many years. I believe the participants were gladdened to realize it was just not them alone complaining at their tables or while BFBing, back fence bitching. There were commonly held opinions about the affairs of the township over many, many years. Several times at this meeting, the phrase "fire 'em" was heard. One speaker, who owns a private corporation, quite large development company, summarized his reality as a private employer. He said, "It's easy to fire, it's hard to hire. It's easy to fire, it's hard to hire." We're at the hard part. How do we hire? Who is directing the hire practice for the CAO? Is it council, as is their responsibility in the OMA, or is it some other body? This man's advice was to put detailed care and focused attention into all aspects of the hiring process. To hire a CAO requires great coordinated effort by all of council in unity. Council has to get its act together. If Ward 2 is an example, there are a lot of well-informed, experienced people who know what they need to be given and what it is that they're not being provided. A lack of information is a problem. As a result of lack of information, trust is a problem. Citizens are smarter than this administration appears to give them credit for, as confirmed by the anecdotal examples of frustration
to the report specifically, Barry.
and simmering anger caused by administration staff. So everybody needs to be really concerned about how you hire and not just who. Council is aware of some of the strong feelings in Wilmot about lack of accurate information and communication flow, and that needs to be fixed. There needs to be, as it was reported in the strategic plan, an improvement in trust, and it was reported in the communication plan. There has to be a culture shift occur within the corporation. There's been a long pattern of practices, and there needs to be a culture shift. You've heard it at least twice in professional consultants being paid big bucks to tell you that. So we're looking for action of how you're going to do that. I'm suggesting that council must write a detailed job description for the role of a CAO in Wilmot that includes the clause that a CAO is accountable to council through reports to council upon its request, and that the CAO is the senior administrative role responsible for leadership downward only to its hired staff. The CA role has no leadership or executive role in the conduct of the affairs upward to council or outward to resident citizens. Write it down, make it a condition of employment, put it in a contract, it's legally enforceable. I recommend that the job description also involve the involvement of the communications strategist, who will be a part of the decision-making processes. It's referred to you in the corporate communications strategy on page 13, number 1, trusted strategic advisor. It says, quote, effective corporate communications teams are highly trusted and integrated within the corporation. They have a seat at leadership tables. They are considered strategists, not simply tacticians. The leadership table for staff is led by the CAO, and that strategy goes downward. The leadership table for the corporation is at council, and that goes downward to staff, and it goes outward to the community. Senior administration and all of administration report up. They don't lead up. They don't lead out. They report up. That should be in the job application. Now, who's going to make the decision? The report before you is deferring responsibility to human resources. Human resources reports to a CAO. It's a conflict of interest, apparently. I see the time. It's an apparent conflict of interest. So what we have to do is have council directing all aspects of the process. You have to be a part of writing the job description. You have to be part of writing the RFP. You have to be a part of approving the consultants. You have to be a part of doing the job description, in writing the contract. You have to be a part of all that in some way or other. Because if you give it away, people know that the faces at this side of the table change every 4 years. But things don't change in the corporation. If you want to create change, and you want to create a culture change, you don't just change the rotating group of 6. You also have to have a change in the culture. And how are you going to do that? That's the job of a CAO, to change the corporate culture in the administrative staff.
Thank you, Barry. You've reached your time. I don't see any questions. I'm going to assume that some of your comments, again, were larger, broad scope.
The larger package will go to the clerk. She'll have all of the documented evidence from all of the research. You know how to do it.
Yes, thank you. Our acting CAO is going to clarify as some of that interpretation is not how the process will be rolling out. So with that, we have separated this out into two separate motions to deal with first the option that council is going to decide on, either option one, which is to go with an external recruitment firm to help council hire, or option two, which is with going internally. We're going to deal with that part of our motion first, and then after we will discuss the second part, which is about who on council will be a part of the hiring committee. But I will ask if we can get the first part, which is that reports CAO-2024-13 be received by council for information, and that council direct staff to proceed with option number, insert what we choose after this conversation, for CAO recruitment. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. I will invite our Acting Chief Administrative Officer, Greg Clark, to introduce the report and I think add some clarity to what we've already heard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as Council directed me a few weeks ago now, in close, this is a report that outlines the process of recruiting the next CAO. And as Madam Mayor identified, I'm speaking to the first option, and I'll let her address, or the first motion, I'll let her address the second one. Really, we looked around, and there's two distinct ways to recruit, either externally or internally. Externally means bringing in a consultant who is experienced in this type of work, who has the network and the connections and the expertise in identifying candidates, both through job postings, through various agencies and organizations, but also specifically looking at headhunting and identifying potential candidates throughout the province that might be interested in the role here in Wilmot. And that's, you know, it comes with a cost, and I've identified it there. It'll be less than $50,000, but until we get through written quotes, we wouldn't know the exact cost. But we would be able to do it through a quoting mechanism and not have to go through a formal RFP process under our procurement bylaw. The second option would be to conduct the recruitment process internally, and this would entail our Human Resources Department, which is, you know, our manager of HR and our HR associate, taking out the process of putting up job postings, advertising it through different agencies, and connecting with organizations that might be able to reach the candidates that we would be looking for. One of the critical things to remember in all of this is that the second part that the mayor is going to address, that hiring committee is the one who's going to establish the job description, the required skills, the things that council's looking for. That committee is going to set that framework, and so either of these processes are going to take that information and use that to attract the next candidate, or attract the candidates that will lead to the next CAO. So at all times, it's going to be council leading the initiative here. It's just a matter of resourcing, and really given limited resourcing within our HR department, staff are of the preference that we look external. We also feel that that's going to have a broader reach. It's going to be able to identify candidates that we wouldn't be able to find on our own because we don't have the connections and the resources. It is probably going to lead to a better candidate pool that then is going to give council a better opportunity to identify the CAO that they're looking for. So any questions about that part? I'm happy to take questions.
Any technical questions, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, not so much a question, but well, perhaps a question, but more so a general comment. This is the area that I actually work in. I do specialize in a different field, but I do feel that an executive search firm would likely be the best result, given that there are extra pieces that come with it. So I would speak in favor of option one, given that it is likely going to include some sort of warranty guarantee where that candidate or successful candidate is going to be there for X amount of time, or the search happens again. So I think there's a potential interest in that from my perspective, but also to speak to interim CAO Clark's recommendation, yes, it does bring with it other connections. My only pause for concern at this point would be looking at it through the just straight quoting method, therefore bypassing an RFP. It is, in my experience, not always the best to go with the cheapest option. I find at this level of executive recruitment, it is likely a retained search, and there's likely benefit in giving direction through an RFP to the correct firm, and then selecting that firm, and not based on cost, but rather based on expertise and past history and success. So I would speak in favor of option one, but perhaps amend that we do go through an RFP process to ensure that we are attracting the right firm and individual to conduct the search.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor, even without an RFP, there is the opportunity to, as it says, a compliant bidder to put certain qualifications around it. So, but I do understand the desire to make sure we get a reputable firm and somebody that can provide a successful engagement. So either or is open to me. I just know the RFP is going to take a little bit longer because of the posting and the evaluation and stuff like that. So it might take a little bit longer. It's going to take a little bit longer because it's Christmas as well. So we're going to take a bit of time to get on this one anyway. So at the end of the day, I'll defer to council on their decision on that one.
Any other technical questions? And then we can open it up to debate. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, my question has to do with option one and option two, and then the CAO selection committee, which is the second part that we're talking about. We're using the CAO selection committee regardless of whether we go with option one or option two. Is that correct? And then maybe a second part to that would be, if we go with option one, would the CAO selection committee make the choice along with acting CAO Clark or CLT, or how would that happen?
Just to clarify, when you are asking making the selection, are you talking about which external recruiter, or are you talking about the final selection of the candidate?
Which external recruiter? So who would make that decision then? So I'm just trying to clarify with option one and option two, what is the role of our second part, which is the CAO selection committee of council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, you're right. The selection committee would have an input on all facets. So we would bring back the quotes and the qualifications, and the portfolios are, references, whatever was provided, and it would be up to that selection committee, obviously within the rules of our procurement bylaw, but making that selection based on that. So everything in this process is driven by that committee.
Councillor Cressman.
So, just so I'm clear, through you, Mayor, wondering if the job description that is used by the recruitment agency, the council has input into that in terms, I assume they do. And then the second step is that final approval is also contingent on the council accepting the individual that is put forward. Is that correct? That's been my experience with most of the boards that I've been involved with.
To your first question about the job description, yes. The job description as it stands right now, whatever we currently have in HR, we would share with the committee. They would vet and add or delete or modify, and then that would be what was used by the recruiter. So the committee is going to establish that. In terms of the process of final selection of the candidate, I'll let the mayor speak to that a little bit more.
Yes, so to answer your question, right now the policy that exists is really the one line that we have. So really it's up to what we as council decide, and that is also partly why we have it in a separate vote, so that we can get the one component dealt with, addressed, and then we can have a discussion on what we as council want to do, as we are fully in control of hiring the CAO. That does fall under our preview. So I would say save that to bring it up for the conversation in a minute. Any other questions on this particular item? Okay, so I will now open it up then if councillors would like to debate on option 1 or option 2, or if you do want to, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I don't know, I feel like we just had a bit of a debate, and I would move that we amend to include option 1, but make an amendment that in RFP, it doesn't need to be super extensive. I mean, I can speak for the recruitment industry to a certain extent. They'll come up with the rest, but they typically will act quickly to get a comprehensive package in front of groups, especially at this level. So I would move that we insert option 1 and also issue an RFP to be clear on what it is we're looking for exactly.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sadhu. Councillor Dunstall, did you have a comment or question on that?
I did. And thank you, through you, Mayor. And this goes to CFO Clark. Does going out for an RFP hinder the process at all, or are there any additional costs in going that route?
There wouldn't necessarily be any additional costs, except we'd formally go through our bids and tenders website, which means they'd have to be registered on bids and tenders to submit a bid, which most of these corporations would be, and that there'd be a little bit more time and administrative work and working with supervisor of procurement to get it on there and finding a proper RFP. So it would mainly be more of a time commitment than anything else.
Any other questions on the amendment before us? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I think the only reason to support putting an RFP out there is that it very much gives clear direction as to what any of these recruiters would be signing up for. And I think it really would dictate and outline what we are looking to see, or what the grouping here is looking to see. So it really just would hopefully give us some better responses back.
Councillor Dunstall.
Pretty typical.
So basically what you're saying then is that it allows the people who are going to be bidding to have a clear indication of what is going to be required, and so that they can judge whether they have that expertise, correct? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
Just so I'm clear, does it require us to take the lowest compliant bidder? And that kind of bothered me in terms of, so anyhow, through you, Mayor, if I didn't say it.
So the term compliant bidder implies that we put certain conditions. So we may have certain references or certain scope of work or certain experience and qualifications. So it doesn't mean that simply the lowest bidder wins. The RFP process, to Councillor Wilkinson's point, does add a little bit more rigor to it, because we may add a scoring matrix or some other mechanism that allows us to differentiate beyond price between different vendors. So it does add a bit of nuance, but going with the quotes doesn't mean that we simply take the lowest cost provider. They still have to show that they're compliant to the expectations of size and scale and scope and previous experience that we set out when we're looking for those quotes.
Any other questions or comments about the amendment before us, councillors? Okay, so just to clarify, we will be voting on the amendment for option number 1, which is to engage an external recruiter and engaging them through a RFP process. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And now on to the second part. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to do the main motion as amended. I'm jumping a step ahead here. So we've now amended the motion to actually insert option 1 and include the RFP. So all those in favor of the main motion, and that carries unanimously. So now on to the second part. And we're going to, before we put it on the floor, because I've heard that there are different people interested, which is great, and I don't want to be biasing by whoever puts up their hand first to get an option to put forward. So in discussion with staff as well as seeing some other processes in other municipalities, I'm first going to see, do we have people of interest? If you are interested, please do put up your hand. That can be more than one, that can be everyone. Okay, so we have 3 people. Okay, we have 4 interested. So I would then ask, we can either do this 2 ways, is go through and hear everyone's just a quick elevator pitch as to why you're interested. Obviously caveating that I know everybody is interested in this process, but we will just go down the road this way, starting with Councillor Cressman, if you just want to. Sorry, Councillor Sadhu, is it a question of clarification?
So just a question. So we have 4 councillors who are interested in doing this, in being on the hiring committee. Isn't there any way that we can amend the policy to allow all 4 on there? Because essentially it is a CAO that reports to council. So if there is interest, and I would open it up to the 5th member also if he would be interested in.
Just let me clarify. Councillor Martin, was that you just saying that you would be interested if that be the case? Or did
Yes, through you, Mayor Sallin. If we were going to consider increasing the number, then I would express my interest.
Okay. I'm going to just turn it over to Clerk Boss, as there does come technical things with doing that, so she will give us the down low on what that would look like.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So when we have a quorum of council, so 4 members, it is a meeting that has to follow open meeting rules, our procedural bylaw, and other governing policies and procedures. So although I was not around when this hiring policy was produced, I would assume the intent of this interview panel being 3 members is so that we are under quorum, so that we don't have to follow open meeting rules and the procedural bylaw. So it can be more of an informal process without calling a special council meeting to order, moving into closed, discussing, reporting out of closed. If it was your wish to go against the hiring policy, that can happen, but just understand that there is going to be some processes that may bog down the speed at which you can move when you do have more than 4 members of council on the hiring committee.
Councillor Wilkinson, I will allow questions for anyone who has them.
Thank you. Through the chair to Clerk Boz, then, a question on procedure. Just to clarify, if we were to, say, work as a group, because I'll be honest, thinking about it, I think this is the one opportunity where we have an employee that reports to council and mayor, you know, to introduce some confidence in the decision being made and have us work together to make sure that we're all happy with the outcome. You know, is this a process that can take place in closed to have that conversation with the candidates so that they're not put out on public display? I don't want a Senate confirmation hearing by any means.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Through you, Mayor Salonen. When there is identifiable individuals, so once candidates were selected, we would be able to take that in closed. Some of the other items, such as consideration of the RFPs and review of the job description, we wouldn't be able to do under the the open meeting rules. So just to keep that in mind with this process, we will have to go in under one of the exceptions to the closed meeting rules.
So, Councillor Sadhu, was that a motion? Have you reconsidered your thought? I'm just trying to figure out where we go next and do this in a
so
making sense process.
With Councillor Martin saying if he would be interested, if it is an all council thing, I would move the motion that it would be all council involved in the hiring committee. And although there is a few extra steps, knowing that the RFP and the job description would be in the public realm, overall I think if you look at CAO recruitment, it is fairly standardized wording in the job description, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a tedious task, but that would be my motion.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Sadhu. Is that seconded? Or
no, actually, I'd like to ask a question through you, Mayor. So is there an issue then with quorum or no?
So, yeah, the clerk would just like it seconded, and then she's happy to answer the question. So that's seconded by Councillor Cressman. Now we will answer your question.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So in proceeding in this manner, you will need to achieve quorum to be able to meet. So at least 4 of you would have to be able to be present at these meetings for them to go forward. And I may have failed to mention it in the other one, we will require notice provisions and agendas to go out to make people aware of these meetings as well. So I just want to keep that in mind as you proceed with this.
And just before you, Councillor Cressman, keeping in mind for everyone that this will presumably include during business hours. That's usually when people interview. So these will be commitments that we'll be needing to find time collectively for ourselves, as well as a clerk will have to be present or somebody with delegated clerk powers to take minutes. So in those interviews, that would mean it would be all of council, and then there would be one other staff person taking minutes, just so everyone's fully aware of what that looks like. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, thinking of this going forward and our procedural changes for 2025 with committee in the whole, etc., does that bring anything to bear on these, or are they exceptions to committee in the whole, etc., etc.?
So they would be held as special council meetings, which I as chair can call with the effective appropriate amount of time. So are there any other questions then, either on process or on what's been put on the floor? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I'm interested, and I expressed my interest because we were considering a larger group. But when I think about the process, I actually think the committee of the 3 people might be a good way to go. And so I wonder if we should reconsider that idea. If I'm saying anything about the interest, there probably is a divide on council in terms of the way we tend to vote, in terms of opinions. So what if we find a way of choosing 3 people that might recognize that divide?
So I hear what you're saying. We do currently have a motion on the floor. If you wish to be able to consider the other option, it would just be voting down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm putting forward my idea that it might be good to vote down this motion.
No, I definitely understand that. I'm just making sure everybody understands procedurally how we would get there. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, and thank you, Councillor Martin, for your opinion on this matter. I would take the opposite approach and disagree. I think this is a good opportunity for all of us to work together to ensure that we look to have a transparent decision that will instill confidence moving forward. And ultimately, we'll make sure that we're going through the motions and having these conversations as a group, because ultimately this is we have a few employees that report indirectly or directly to council, but really this is the big one. So I would hope that we can come out of this process owning it as a group and then moving forward as a group so that we are all comfortable with the outcome and that nobody is left behind or wondering what the decision or how the decision was achieved. So I would speak in favor of the motion on the floor and hope that we can move forward. And I know sometimes my schedule can be challenging, but I will commit to making this a priority and move forward in that way.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion before us? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, so I'm planning to vote against the motion, but assuming that the motion goes through, I will very happily and wholeheartedly join the process.
Okay, very good. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor, all those opposed, and that carries. And on to our second report of the evening, which is 12.2, the community grants. The recommendation is that the community grants program be received for information and that council approve amendments and policy to the community grants program for implementation in 2025 as presented in this report. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman, and I will now invite our Director of Community Services, Chris Catania, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. This report recommends the Council amendments and approval to the policy governing the Community Grants Program. Each year, the Township budgets an amount for the Community Grants Program. Staff prepare and advertise the program, receive applications, review, and make recommendations to Council for the award of grants to various community groups. Staff endeavor to holistically look at the grants program, provide more accountability that is transparent, consistent, and achieves the optimal impact for the investment provided, but also flexible in funding the availability of activities that enhances the quality of life to all. Earlier this fall, staff consulted with various stakeholders to review applications and their processes, improvements to the process, criteria, and eligibility, as well as financial accountability. Furthermore, staff have gathered insight from other municipal comparators to help revise this policy. Notable changes to the draft policy include maximum funding requests, organizations serving the needs of Wilmot residents, funds not being used for administering payroll costs, and post-event reporting on the impact that any grants that were awarded would have achieved. If Council approves the amended policy, the funding for the community grants program is addressed yearly through the municipal budget process, at which time Council decides on the availability of funds. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Catania. And yes, I just want to underline and emphasize your final point. By Council dealing with the policy tonight, we are not making a determination on the actual funding component. That will come at budget time. This is really about getting a policy in place, or I guess an updated policy in place. With that, we'll go to Councillor Cressman for questions.
Through you, Mayor, to Director Catania. Yes, I think there's some nice things in this that I see. I'm wondering the receiving organization having to have a board of directors, not that I don't like it, I'm just wondering, have you done any quick evaluation how many that will exclude?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Cressman, haven't had a quick calculation on how we would exclude that, but we would be flexible in this policy, and that's something that we can definitely scratch out.
Councillor Cressman.
And then a follow-up, through you, Mayor, one of the things in terms of the farm organizations and commodities organizations I've been involved with is there's always a financial examiner who is separate from the distinctly, two people who are appointed distinct from the treasurer to go over the financial records of the organization. It's not an auditor's report, but a financial examiner's report to try to determine how the funds are used. And I think that adds a certain degree of somebody else looking over the shoulders of these of the treasurer to determine how funds were appropriated, etc. And so I just throw that on the table as something to possibly be considered. I'm not sure if every organization that has a board of directors, whether that's just normal practice. If it is, fine. But I think it's worth asking the question, and I'd like to see it. Don't want to see it.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Cressman, just to clarify on a couple of points there. Even if it's informal, we can definitely strike that out. But I think from a financial perspective, when we look at the auditing piece, there were certain municipalities that would have an external auditor. But in the case of Wilmot, with some of the, at least previously here, with some of the applications that came in for the grants, it became cost prohibitive to them apply for something very nominal and, to provide that type of financial statement. So I'll revisit in looking at where we can have additional oversight when it comes to that transparency with their books.
No, just through you, Mayor, just some clarification. Usually it was a member of the board of directors or whatever, other than the treasurer that provided that role that could do the math to determine whether the revenue and expenses made sense, and so I'm not. My goal is not to suggest an auditor or a bookkeeper brought in separately for that. My goal is just to have a second individual looking over the financial records, and usually there's two people that sign off on it out of an organization that say we've perused the financial records and found them in order. And that just adds a certain degree of integrity to it, in my mind.
So staff at the moment are going to take that away unless you wanted explicit direction.
I've got everybody confused.
Not confused, I think just not wanting to definitively commit to something at this moment without knowing they have the resources to do such.
I guess what I'm reading here through you, Mayor, is that nonprofit will be required to have a volunteer board of directors. Is that what I'm reading? Have I got this right? And then I'm just saying that we add to it that there is some type of internal check of their own set of books by another member of their organization.
So you're not saying our organization has to
No,
you're saying their organization
their
have
own
a process.
organization goes through and peruses their own books, but it has to be somebody other than the treasurer that does it.
SOX compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley.
Okay. I'm now caught up because I was interpreting that differently, but we will go back to Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, and to Councillor Cressman, it will be taken under advisement. We want to make sure this is flexible enough. I don't want to make it restrictive where all of a sudden nonprofit community groups are like, well, we can't apply because we don't have a board of directors. We can definitely look at striking that out. We are trying to align this even with our affiliation policy, so there's some synergies between those two with what we classify as nonprofit.
Very good. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'm wondering actually if we should formalize that. I mean, I'd happily support it. I think, yeah, standard practice we see maybe in larger organizations, but one that given we're doling out public funds makes sense. Just a general comment on the policy. I mean, I appreciate the work that your department has done on this and applaud your efforts. I think it's timely in a sense because it could potentially change the grant program that we will really refocus these funds into what they're intended for, which is sort of one-time small capital investments to help grow the size of a program and potentially also decrease the spending that we're putting into this. So I think it's timely, given the budget conversation that is upcoming. I won't go into that tonight again, but I think the process and the policy overall is good. But I don't know. I would look to my peer to my right here and maybe look to formalize that particular. If you wanted to add that as an amendment.
He took it under advisement. So.
All right, we'll go with that. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Sadhu.
Thank you to Director Catania. I want to just say thank you for bringing this report forward. I know we had a conversation a few months ago. I think this helps bring the grant program kind of more into line with what it was meant to be. Particularly, it's nice to see that it is in writing that organizations can't use the funds to help fund administration and payroll costs. They have to justify where the money is being spent, et cetera. So I was happy to see these changes, and thank you for the report.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none. So we do have our motion on the floor and moved and seconded, so I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. As for our announcements this evening, I will keep them short and sweet.
You're skipping things. We have a motion.
I'm sorry, I'm apparently skipping items. I just really want to get.
She must have something that she wants to get.
It's not even Monday Night Football. I have about 3 chapters left in a really good book, but so I'm sorry, everyone, for trying to skip the queue here. Bylaw is what we have to approve the fire coverage that we already discussed earlier this morning. Today, wow, please don't watch this recording if you're not already in the room with us. May I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws to be read a first, second, and third time as attached to this agenda? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We do have the notices of motion, and I am very sorry, councillors, that I was skipping ahead. So I will invite Councillor Sadhu to introduce his notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So essentially my notice of motion is looking to bring back a report from staff that gives a comprehensive report on the historical financial position of the township and essentially how we got here. I'm not looking to blame anyone. I'm not looking to point and say, and trust me, as someone who watches politics, the worst thing I like to hear is, well, it's all the previous administration's fault. That's not what this is for. This is essentially, if I'm being asked to go to our residents and say, we need more money, we need a 50% increase, I need to be able to justify how we got here. And when they ask, well, why? I can't just say, don't worry about it. We're not going to focus on the past, let's look at the future, which is fair, but we need to have an understanding of how we got here. One comprehensive document to add for further transparency for staff, for council, for residents, that we can view it, understand it, and hopefully not make those same mistakes twice.
Thank you, Councillor Sadhu. Councillor Dunstall, is that for seconding or is that a question? Okay, you're going to second it? Okay, so it's seconded by Councillor Dunstall, and Councillor Dunstall, you can speak to it.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This is such a difficult situation for all of us to grasp, and although I appreciate Councillor Sadhu wants answers, I really struggle to justify the significant time and resources it's going to take, and that all costs money, being spent on looking backwards. The level of detail requested feels excessive, and it raises the question, once we have this information, how does it help us move forward? It just doesn't make sense to focus time looking behind us when in front of us our house is on fire. Effective leadership means focusing on the future, collaborating with stakeholders, and having tough discussions about service cuts and asset sales and finding the best balance for taxpayers and while maximizing capital funding. So although I understand, Councillor Sadhu, why you brought it forward, and I certainly appreciate that, I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Acting CAO Clark, I was looking at this, and how much time would this take to present, to go through and give a forensic accounting, in your opinion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. I did speak to Councillor Sadhu last Wednesday, and agreed upon a 20-year time frame. The further back we go, the more difficult it gets. So we have a number of these reports in terms of tax increases, annual reports, financial statements available on the website, and it's a matter of going through and pulling out data. So that is time consuming, but it is available. Once we get past about 2011, 2012, we start to have to go into our system, which is antiquated, as you've heard me say before, and we have to pull out data a year at a time and do the review and do some searching and looking through files. So the level of time, I can't put a number around it. It's going to be in, not just a few hours. It's probably going to be several hundred hours worth of time between myself, the manager of finance, and others. One of the concerns I have is that Q2 is not a reasonable time frame, given that budget will be completing in January. Year end will be beginning January 2nd, and that takes us through the audit in April, May, June. And so bringing this forward before the end of September, I think would be a real challenge given our resourcing level. So I would ask that if we are to proceed with this, that staff be given till at least the end of Q3 to provide this information back.
Any, yes, Q3 is what Acting CEO Clark said. Councillor Sadhu?
Thank you. Well, I respect it would take a lot of work, but at the end of the day, this is tax money. This is the residents' money, and we need to be able to show how we got here, why we got here, and it adds a level of transparency. Like, I do understand that it would be a lot of work, but when I was running, I was told many of times that we're in great financial health, we're debt-free, and then within the first couple of weeks of joining council, we realized maybe it wasn't as rosy as it was being painted. And I have heard from a lot of residents who are reaching out saying thank you for bringing this up, and they were under the same, I wouldn't say false pretenses, but they were under the same line of thinking that they thought the township was in good financial health. So I think this just helps highlight major decisions that were made that led us to this situation, and like I said, have one comprehensive document where it can be viewed and we can have a better understanding.
Okay. I guess I don't know if it's a question or more so a comment, but I'm familiar that the County of Norfolk passed a similar motion in their council chambers as they're experiencing similar financial discovery, shall we say. And I do know that I have had a lot of residents ask, how did we get to this point? And a lot of them find it hard to digest what information we do have online. So I can see the value in bringing that forward. I guess kind of where my question comes is expectation setting. Should this be passed? Like, for example, when I'm looking at analysis of spending habits, including any notable trends or shifts and policy improvements made in response to financial challenges, I feel that's just very open-ended, and somebody could be analyzing and provide like a PhD level report, or it could be a few sentences. I guess I just want to make sure before we would make any decision that there's an understanding of staff of the expectation and of council of what information they're looking for. I don't want there to be a mismatch of expectation versus reality, as well as I don't want a lot of resources and time spent over analyzing something that has historically happened. But Councillor Sadhu, if you want to comment, and then I might ask staff for their thoughts.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I had that conversation with CFO Clark about this, and I did assure him that, look, I'm not looking for an intense, in-depth analysis of the pennies and cents and the dollars. General high level of a general analysis of certain spending habits and how we got here. I'm not looking to get too much into the weeds, but to keep it high level. And monetary value, I believe we were talking about things over $1 million or in and around there. So the big ticket items that would be highlighted.
Yes, and I did have that conversation with Councillor Sadhu, and we did talk about, investments being significant investments, so $1 million plus investments in the community, what types of significant investments were made that changed the finances of the organization, as well as the spending habits, looking at more of an annual basis, so not getting into a week-to-week or month-to-month spending analysis, but looking at year-to-year, where were we spending more or less money, how were we spending that money, and looking at it at a higher level. So that does limit the scope some, but it's the time, it's a long period of time, and so looking at it year by year is going to take some effort and time.
Just one other thing, and then I will get to our two other councillors over there. I would also, and I know it does not ask for any names in here, but I would want it to be explicitly clear that there are no names provided, or I don't want this to become an opportunity for people to look at it as a witch hunt or to be blaming. I think that every past council has done the best with the resources they have, as well as staff have done best with the resources they have, and these are just a series of decisions that have led us to where we are. So that's just something else. Generally speaking, I would not want included should a report go forward. Just keep it at, this is what happened in the corporation over this time kind of thing. But Councillor Dunstall and then Councillor Martin after.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Mr. Clark, you mentioned or we were talking about investments over $1 million. I just wanted to make sure that nothing has changed in the respect that any investment that was brought forward to council would have been a council decision. The township never just says, hey, I'm just going to spend $1 million, too bad, so sad, see you later. Is that correct?
So to answer your question and to the mayor's, we would be looking at sort of, what capital investments were made on an annual basis that were directed by council. But that would be the end of the conversation. So it wouldn't be looking into minutes and discussions of who said what and who approved and who voted and who didn't. It would simply be saying, in this calendar year, we built, for example, WRC is the biggest one, right? What year did we build WRC? How did we fund that? What did it impact in terms of operations and capital? How many staff did we add? Those types of identified things. It's not going to find, I would hope, it doesn't find things that weren't approved by council. That would be a whole different conversation. This is really identifying council said, do this, staff went out and did that, and that's what the consequences of that action were.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? I know I had Councillor Martin, Wilkinson, and then Cressman. Yes.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, and my tendency is to vote against this motion, but I did hear you say, Acting CEO Clark, that if you were going to do it, you would want to do it by Q3 rather than Q2. So I would put forward a motion to make an amendment that we would change it to Q3.
Okay, so an amendment has been put forward to change the time outlined to Q3. That's seconded. No, okay, I need a seconder first. Okay, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Dunstall, is this a comment on the amendment? No, it's not. Okay, so we will deal with the amendment first. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, even as it's amended, I think a 2-decade, 20-year period is too long. I think it was indicated that from 2011 and onward would be considerably easier than going back to 2004, or at least that's what I think my 2 decades mean. So
I hear where you're going.
I would speak against the amendment.
Okay, you're speaking against the amendment. Okay. Should you want to change the motion, if you want to change the time frame, you can bring that forward as another amendment if you choose. Okay, so we have the amendment before us to change it to Q3. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that fails. And so now we're back to the main motion, and I still have a speakers list on that. It was Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Cressman, and then Councillor Dunstall.
Through the chair, I've sort of reserved comment until the end here to sort of hear how it's evolved. I think what I'm hearing is this is something that would be beneficial to us in terms of shedding some light on not anybody specifically, not pointing fingers, but rather just past practices that have led to a situation we're currently facing. And I think just sort of briefly overhearing what Councillor Cressman intends to likely do, I would probably support that. Do we need to go back forever? No, we could potentially shorten the time span and probably discover what some of these challenges or situations that occurred were. And I think that the whole purpose here is really just to provide that general outline as a document that we can use moving forward, and it answers a lot of questions, I think. So in general, I'm in favor. I know it will take some time. I know it will be difficult work, but I think one that will provide a lot of answers to the community, and one that I know is a very common question. So I would be in favor.
Okay, Councillor Cressman?
Yes. I would introduce a motion that we would change the time span to, I think, 2011 and onward, as I heard the CAO mention, as being the area of study.
The CAO is just confirming that he got that number correct when he said it. So we'll just give him a moment there. Councillor Wilkinson, is that
Through the
second?
chair, may I ask a question on the proposed amendment, and I think one that would be somewhat relevant?
Our clerk would just like it to be seconded first, and then we can discuss. So if we can just wait one moment to get clarification, then we will. Yes, 2011 is the correct time. So we have a motion moved to change the date 2011 and onward. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Martin. And comments or questions on the amendment?
Yes, I think sooner is better than later. Higher level is better than tremendous amount of detail. I think anything that assists us as a council to not vilify a previous administration. We weren't sitting in their chairs understanding what things they were looking at or how they viewed the future. It's very easy to look in the rearview mirror and say, coulda, shoulda, woulda. I wouldn't have had to farm as long as I did and pay as much interest as I did because of that. I would have known when to sell my cattle and sell my grain, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what I'm looking at is trying to provide context for what we see as the dramatic situation where we are in as a township, and the quicker we can get that information in our hands to provide to our residents, I think benefits us. And if that means trying to lessen the load and get it quicker, then I'm all for that.
Councillor Dunstall, I've not forgotten about you. Okay, did you have anything to say on the current motion, amendment, sorry? No? Okay. Any other comments on this particular amendment then? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair to CFO Clark, I guess my question around the amendment, and I realize 2011 is sort of the date you're bringing forward, I have a suspicion, or I guess when was the rec center built?
I'm being told 2007, so prior to that.
After that, through the chair, could I make an amendment to the amendment?
I would dispose with this amendment and then.
Well, it's amending it's keeping the same amendment in spirit, but amending it to include a deeper look just at the rec center expenditures.
So you're saying, okay.
When was the pool added?
2012 is when the pool was added. The rec center itself was built in 2007. So you're looking, in essence, you want to keep the amendment with the 2011, but then add in specifics on the rec center building in 2007.
Correct.
Okay.
Everything else.
I don't like friendly amendments. Councillor Cressman, do you see that as friendly? If it's totally up to you. If not, we can deal with your part and then have us after.
Let's live or die with my amendment, and then we'll come.
Yep. Very good. So we will keep the amendment as is, so 2011 onward for reporting. To be fair, supporting this doesn't change the ability for Councillor Wilkinson to bring forward his additional request. Any other comments or questions on this amendment as it stands? Okay, so we will call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? And that, all those opposed? And that carries. Now, I do have Councillor Dunstall on my speaking list first, and I know she's been patiently waiting to speak to the main motion, and then we will go to Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, I have a candy. I've got a cough here. Through you, Mayor. I am having a real hard time trying to figure out what all of this information is going to give us. Honestly, I really do. We know that the rec center drained reserves. We know that in the past we haven't always given the proper amount of tax hikes, and I have to tell you, I've been here for 2 budgets, and for each budget, we were given a number by Township, and each time we went back to Township because our constituents said, we can't pay this. This is too much. You need to do something. So we went back to Township and we did the exact same thing that everybody else did. We sat there and we said, nope, sorry, we can't take this. We're not going to take this. You need to cut. You either need to cut in operations or you need to defer capital expenditures. We did it. Everybody did it. We can't do it anymore. And so I think that going back is a way sorry, Mr. Clark, do you have any idea what the cost would be for this? Any idea at all? Like ballpark, are we looking at a couple of $100 or are we looking at a few $1,000s?
Really, it's a matter of time and effort. So we're going to be doing it with internal staff. So it's a matter of staff hours being dedicated towards this project. And I do estimate it's going to take a few hundred hours to go through, compile, and put it all together in a format that can be shared with the public and council. And so, you know, there is a cost to that. It's not going to add to the bottom line, but it's going to mean that staff can't do other things because they're going to be spent going through previous budgets, financial statements, and other items to compile this information.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I would propose a specific amendment to what we have here, just to further look into only the costs associated with the rec center back to the original proposal, design, construction, beyond the 2011 time. That is it. Just to have that information at hand.
Okay, so that is moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any comments on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that is defeated. So now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any other comments or questions on it at this time? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I still am not really in favor of this motion because of the concern that I have for the amount of time that it takes for staff to prepare the report. I realize I respect my colleagues' concerns and the interest expressed in the information. The information is, of course, important. Having lived here through this time, I remember comments like years ago, let's keep our taxes low. And so I think decisions were made that reserves were not built and things were deferred. Even since we've been elected, we've deferred things, including roads. So I see the trends, and I think we can look at the history without putting the onus on the staff to prepare such a large report.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Stu.
I just want to reiterate that when it comes to tax dollars, hard-earned residents' tax dollars, I see that it is a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. I've only started paying property taxes during COVID, so I never enjoyed the years of 0% increases, and now I'm asked to essentially foot the bill for years of past practice that has brought us to today. I talked to a lot of new families that have just recently moved here during COVID, and they're saying, what the heck, 51%, how did we get here? I just want to have something to show them that essentially this is how we got here, and this is something that we need to focus on, that we don't make these mistakes again in the future, and we can all learn from it.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I agree with what my colleague is saying. I think ultimately at the end of the day, and I heard it a lot this past weekend when engaging with constituents, it's a lack of understanding and an inability to dig through the information on their own. Knowledge is power. Knowledge can help us direct where we go in the future because we will be informed as to the decisions in the past. Around this horseshoe, we have the benefit of digging through all this information because we've been elected by our peers to dig through it and read it and understand it. But I think the general public is looking for a little bit more, and this can be that piece that really sends the message home as to what happened, how did we get here, why we don't want to necessarily repeat these same things again. So I think ultimately, if we think of this as, yes, it can be a burdensome exercise, absolutely, but that is what we're here to do, is to get the information for the public so that we can make sure that a public corporation is moving forward with the knowledge properly. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Cressman?
Could I, through you, Mayor, could I request the clerk to read the amended motion, because we've kind of bounced this around and I'm not so sure we're going to get what we want to hear, are going to have a wholesome, well, a fulsome view of the past.
Yes, would you like the whole thing or just the amended component?
The amended.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So in the paragraph starting with, therefore be it resolved that Wilmot Township Council directs staff to prepare a report on the township's financials, we have struck out over the past 2 decades and inserted from 2011 forward, including a high-level summary that provides an overview of the following. That is the only amendment that carried.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the motion as amended before us? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor, all those opposed, and that carries. Now we're on to announcements. I will also note it was the bylaw that threw me off because I was thinking it was the confirmatory bylaw. All right. That's after. Yes, all right. I will keep the announcement short and sweet tonight, but the holiday season is upon us, and I want to wish a Merry Christmas to all of those who celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. This year, Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. I want to wish you a happy Hanukkah to those who commemorate the Second Temple of Jerusalem, the rededication of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, which this year will also be taking place on December 25th at sundown until January 2nd. Also, I want to wish those happy Kwanzaa who celebrate, and this honors African heritage and community and will be celebrated from December 26th to January 1st. And happy holidays and celebrations to any that I have missed, as well as a happy new year, and I hope that all the community members feel connected to the wider community during the holiday season and everyone stays safe and healthy. Councillors, do any of you have announcements? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, thank you. A brief announcement. Want to thank everybody in Ward 2 and beyond that attended the town hall this past weekend. It was successful. I appreciate everybody's engagement, and we hope to do this again in the future. But as a reminder out of that meeting, if you have comments on the budget@wilmot.ca, as well as the January 7th meeting, which is a Tuesday night from 7 to 9, you can register to address council. I just want to remind everyone of that. These are important dates and an important email address, so look forward to your continued engagement.
Thank you. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, just a reminder, a town hall has been set up, including the acting CEO and treasurer. At least he was invited. Maybe I'm on his naughty list. It's Thursday, January the 9th at the New Dundee Community Center from 7 to 9, and looking forward to having a solution-oriented discussion.
Very good. And Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I will also take the opportunity. New Hamburg will be having their town hall on January 7th at the old arena. Oh, sorry, January 4th. Sorry, January 4th. I got confused with January 7th. January 4th at the old arena. And it's not a rumor. CFO Clark will be in attendance. So come and bring your questions. Thank you.
Councillor Sadhu.
What they said, except mine. So I have a town hall January 2nd at the rec center from 7 to 9 p.m. I have some posters up throughout Baden. If you want any clarification, feel free to just give me a call or email, and if you have any questions beforehand, but otherwise I will be taking questions live. Thanks.
Thank you very much, councillors. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I just want to take the opportunity. Sometimes as councillors and staff, we have differences of opinion, and I think that's healthy. It creates an opportunity to get ideas on the floor and discussions. But through it all, I've gained an appreciation for each one of you, and all the best over these holiday season.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, seeing none other announcements, I do actually just want to quickly note thank you all for hosting town halls, and thank you to our staff who are helping, both on the administrative side as well as Carly, who is logistically helping to organize these behind the scenes. So just wanted to acknowledge all the staff involved in you having opportunities to speak with your councillors. We do have business arising from close to report out. And we have separated the motion acknowledging Councillor Dunstall's conflict of interest. So the first recommendation is that Council appoints the following citizens to the Heritage Wilmot and Castle Kilbride Advisory Committee for a term expiring December 31st, 2026. For the members of Matt Crawford, Kristen Han, and Julie Molnar. And that Council forwards the nomination of Amber Grant to the Region of Waterloo to represent the Township of Wilmot as a citizen non-voting member on the Region of Waterloo Library Board. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And our second recommendation, which Councillor Dunstall has her conflict of interest with, is that the Council appoints the following citizens to the Wilmot Canada Day Event Task Force as a term expiring December 31st, 2026, and that would be Janet DeVita, Susan Hammer, and Ed Penner. May I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And I do just want to acknowledge a huge thank you to everyone who did submit applications for the multiple committees. We really appreciate the community engagement. And if you were not successful this go around, please do not be discouraged. Unfortunately, there were more applicants than positions on some of the committees, so we do encourage you to keep an eye open for opportunities as they do arise. That is all of our business from closed. May I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Moved by Councillor sorry. Yes, we did pass that. Yep. No, you did actually vote in favor of it. So. Very good. So the confirmatory bylaw, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And adjournment. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that is moved. Have a great evening.